Hey, what's up, parents and teachers? It's me, Seth with SethPerler.com, and I have an interesting question here that I got from a parent about a school that is trying to help kids learn about entrepreneurialism. So the parent is asking about executive function and becoming an entrepreneur, but I'll read this email to you so you understand specifically what she's asking. Anyhow, as I said, my name is Seth Perler. I'm an executive function coach based in Colorado, and I help struggling students navigate this thing called education so that they can have a great life. So then this is totally related to this question because when a student struggles with executive function, it can have a negative impact on their potential future quality of life. That's the whole reason it matters. Is if they don't get this figured out, it can impact their life. It can limit their choices. So here's the question. Okay, here's the question. How do you think executive functioning applies to being an entrepreneur? That's the first question. And then she goes into a little bit of a story I'll get to in a second. So basically, I think the way executive functioning applies to being an entrepreneur is that I'm an entrepreneur, anybody who's an entrepreneur who wants to have their own business has to be able to execute. And what Seth talks about is what we're trying to do. If you're a parent or a teacher and you're trying to help a kid who has struggles with executive function, we want to help the student get from point A to point B. Point A is a point where they're struggling with executive function, and point B is the point where you can go, this kid's going to be okay. It's not perfect, but we have what Seth calls good enough executive function. So if I am going to, and I have very legitimate executive function struggles, and I have all my life. For me to be an entrepreneur, my struggles with executive function definitely, absolutely, positively, 100% impact my ability to be an entrepreneur. I struggle with things. I feel like sometimes I work 10 times harder than everybody else to get the same things done. So it's definitely a struggle. But I have good enough executive function that I can build a business that I love, that is meaningful and purposeful to me, where I can pay the bills and have a good life and have the type of freedom and schedule and meaning that is important to me. And for me, what is meaningful is helping kids who struggle with this stuff. So that's what I've created a business out of. So how does executive functioning apply to being an entrepreneur? Well, it's everything. If you are going to be an entrepreneur, you have to execute on building your own thing. And executing means you have to know how to plan, you have to know how to manage time, you have to know how to organize, you have to know how to advocate for yourself, you have to know all of these different things. You have to be able to focus, pay attention, concentrate. You have to be able to do many things, all of these executive function skills in order to execute. So let me get on with the email. She says, I've recently joined a group at my son's school whose goal is to improve the entrepreneurial program, which is the foundation of the school. That is very rare. That's very cool, I think, because most of the students that I work with don't fit in the box. And if they had to do a typical job, a lot of them would really struggle with it. And so anyhow, I think a lot of my students are really built to be great entrepreneurs, but they struggle with the execution. So in a recent brainstorming session, we came up with a bunch of ideas geared towards improving the program. I suggested strengthening the teaching of executive functioning skills because I feel the school does a great job of providing the kids with a chance to practice the skills, but not a lot of teaching about what they are. Let me address this right now. So we don't do that. So as a culture, our schools don't teach this. And the problem with this is that the kids with, let's say, nature versus nurture, let's say naturally good executive function, those kids appear to be trying harder. And the kids who struggle with executive function, the myth, or one of the many myths, is that, hey, kid, you're not trying. You're being lazy. You need to be more motivated. You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You need to try harder. You need to work harder. You need to put forth more effort. You've got so much potential. Why don't you just do it? Well, the reason they don't is because the struggle is legitimate. So when it's not taught directly and kids who pick it up naturally, they look like they're trying harder, and like these kids aren't. There's this big, giant misunderstanding around that. So yes, teaching the skills is really, really important because we don't have words around it. And it's 2020. We should be talking about executive function among many other things in schools that we don't talk about. one of which you mentioned later in your email here. Okay. Which is frankly the case in a lot of schools. True. Schools don't teach executive function. They assume that kids will pick it up through osmosis. Then the ones who don't are labeled as lazy or unmotivated or undisciplined or not trying or blah, blah. Okay. I'm a huge believer that having a language around issues helps communication, problem resolving, and creating solutions that happen more smoothly. Exactly. Yes. If you had language around executive function, the aspects of executive function, if you look at my aspects on my site and you were using those as if they were skills to be learned, because they are, that would help you all a lot. Yes, you're right on. The admin seems open, but there's a lot of other members who are really resistant. Yes, those other members are probably people who naturally have very good executive function. And literally, and it's not their fault, but they do not comprehend and understand that people who don't have good executive function, that's not a matter of willfulness, that they should, again, just try harder, just work harder, just be more motivated, just be more disciplined. They don't understand the validity of legitimate executive function struggles because it's always come easy to them. So I assume that that's a lot, like they're not educated on it. That's why they're resistant. A couple of things that I'm coming up against: a lack of understanding of what EF skills means. Yes, please use my stuff. Grab my assessment, my free stuff. There's so much, like hand them a PDF of one of the things. You know, it's got to be, and put it on me or put it on some other person out there who's in the executive function field so that they can see in black and white and it's not you telling them. Yeah. So yeah, they probably do have a lack of understanding. And you said there's a resistance to the idea of planning in connection with entrepreneurialism. I don't know what you mean on that one. And then 3, a desire to focus only on the new and innovative and risk tolerance aspects of entrepreneurialism. Yes, I would agree with that too. I don't know exactly what you mean, but what happens a lot of times in schools is we tend to have a very narrow, sort of myopic view of what's important in terms of developing a program. And what happens in schools a lot of times is we don't empower kids to be really creative and think outside the box. We really don't teach them to think. We are teaching them to comply a lot of times. And part of the reason for that is that because we want to measure what's measurable. And what's measurable is things that we can put numbers and grades on. A, B, C, D, F is concrete. 80, 90, 100, 76%, these things are concrete. They appear to be meaningful because they're concrete. You can say, yeah, I got a B. That appears to be meaningful, but is it really? And the problem is that we've created a system that looks at these metrics and what does a B mean? Why did the person get a B? What information does that really give you? Did they learn a lot and they earned a B? Was it easy for them and they whipped it out in 5 minutes and got a B? Did they cheat and get a B? Did they just do what they were told and really didn't have to think, but they just answered the multiple choice questions and got a B? What is a B? So so what happens is that we tend to make programming, this is in response to this question, we tend to make programming that tends to be around how are we going to score this, and then we're really losing out on the thinking, the creativity, the imagination, and things that entrepreneurs need. And then I'm going to address this where you said lack of understanding. I'm going to address this too. So entrepreneurs have to be able to execute on many tasks. So my business, Seth's business, for example, it's like a grandfather clock. There are a million moving pieces. Any of your kids who start a small business, there are a million moving pieces that they have to keep track of, and they have to keep that clock in tune. Now, one way that they can do that is a lot of brilliant entrepreneurs who don't have good executive function are good at delegating, or they learn to be good at delegating, and then they have other people who are doing the things that they're not good at. I have at least 3 people on my team right now, and periodically I have other people or hire freelancers or things on my team because I can't do it all. I don't want to do it all. I'm not good at everything. I want to do what I'm good at and focus on my wheelhouses and have my team work on the rest. So, but basically the point is that if your child struggles with executive function and you know they're an entrepreneur type, but you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, but if they had a business, the business would probably fail because they'd forget a million things. You're probably right. Therefore, it is critical to teach these executive function skills so that your child has good enough executive function so that when they do a business, it will be a struggle, but they'll be able to figure it out, either do it themselves or hire it done by other people. Now, what we're doing, in my opinion, and I say this a lot, but I don't say it a lot on my vlog, so listen very carefully to this part. What I believe we're doing a lot, what we want to do. What we do a lot is we have a curriculum, we have a textbook, we say answer the questions at the end of the chapter, blah, 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 all this boring stuff. A lot of kids, they're just bored to death. But a lot of kids with good executive function, they're able to jump through the hoops and feel very successful. Now, not all teachers are like this, but a lot of education is like this, where there's just the boring, standard, typical, traditional education. But, that's very limited. It doesn't teach us to think. It doesn't teach us to create. It doesn't challenge us. We are too concerned with grades and scores and numbers and not concerned enough with being engaged in meaningful learning experiences. So what I think is what we really want to do is help kids become, whether they have good executive function or not, but obviously my passion is working with kids who struggle with it. We want to help them become good project managers. If we give kids ownership and they had buy-in in terms of the projects that they were doing that were educational, and we guided them to do long-term projects and didn't grade them with grades and help them do things that mattered to them, that were purposeful, that were meaningful, that were interesting to them, and we taught them project management skills, essentially, which is executive function skills with timelines and figuring out what's your plan, planning out the project, all the executive function stuff, then we would be helping kids develop really strong skills. Again, education oftentimes is creating compliant people who will be good at doing what they're told. Your kid who struggles with executive function probably hates being told what to do. They're just dying to do their own thing and create and imagine. And oftentimes educational experiences can stifle that and make them be like, I don't like school. I hate school. Why, blah, blah, But we want to, if we help them become project managers, we're doing executive function at the same time. If you can teach a kid to be a good project manager, execute well on these things that matter to them, imagine the difference between a kid who is in a traditional setting who struggled with executive function and someone who is empowered and guided and taught to develop their own projects and not graded on it, to develop things that matter to them. Imagine the difference and potential for them to be able to create an entrepreneurial endeavor when they are older. It's pretty night and day as far as Seth is concerned. So your last sentence, you say, my thought is that creativity and risk tolerance have a lot to do with EF skills. Yes, they do. And a lot of kids who struggle with executive function have high risk tolerance, which is very good in terms of certain things with the business and can be very detrimental if they're making really bad choices in life. But in my business, every time I do something new, a summit, start to write a book, put out a new video like the one I'm doing right now, like this is a risk. I'm putting myself out there on the internet for you all to judge me, hate me, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not worried about that because my risk tolerance says, whatever, I'm going to be of service. Like I have my own frame around it. So I'm not stuck in perfectionism, in the video being perfect, in my hair being perfect, the lighting being perfect, the mic being in the screen. I don't care. I want to deliver a message. So my risk tolerance in having struggling executive function, I also have high risk tolerance, which works in my benefit in this case. Anyhow, but yes, they definitely have a lot to do with executive function skills, updating, shifting, self-regulation, as you mentioned here on this email. Finally, in taking an idea from a vision to a profitable business has tons of executive function involvement. Yes, taking an idea to that point is all execution. You are correct, 100%. People who have successful businesses that are very linear, that have strong executive function, they execute well. They see the matrix, they know all the pieces of the puzzle. But somebody who struggles with executive function, but is a visionary and can see what they want to create, but has trouble executing stuff, they just need good enough executive function or support around them to get the things done. So I could list tons of famous people that struggle with executive function but have highly successful businesses that they've created because they have learned to have good enough executive function and they have learned to get the support that they need. With that, again, my name is Seth with SethPerler.com, Executive Function Coach of Colorado. I'm really glad you're here. I hope you and your family and your friends are safe and healthy during this crazy time. And I also hope that during this crazy time where there's a lot of people who are angry and agitated and frustrated and people are really struggling with all kinds of things around the world right now, I hope that you have peace in your heart, a smile on your face today, some joy, and most importantly, some real connection with your child. Be well. I'll see you soon. Oh, hey, if you're not subscribed to my site, subscribe on YouTube, like this, give it a thumbs up, put a comment, do those things. If this helped you, do those things to support me. Be well. Take care.